listening to the Holy Bible 1-Year Challenge with Master Storyteller Michael Wood, featuring the easy-to-read version and used by permission from Bible League International. Enjoy the show!
Hello everyone, welcome to day 136. We are beginning in the book of Ruth, and I'll be going through a more detailed introduction in this episode. We are also continuing in the book of John. And we come across an interesting situation where Jesus heals a blind man on the Sabbath. And the Jews have a problem with this. And we go into a very detailed investigation of what exactly happened. And they investigate the blind man and his parents. And they're trying to figure out, first of all, if Jesus truly healed this guy, or if it's all just a scam. And if Jesus did in fact heal a blind man, where is this power coming from? Because it could not be from God, according to the Jews, because Jesus did this on the Sabbath. And nobody from God would work or do any work on the Sabbath. Remember, the Sabbath is a day of rest, and it's one of the 10 commandments. So is Jesus above the law? What is his response to this? How do we balance the scales of religious justice? Stay with us to find out more, and refer to your show notes to follow along. The Book of Ruth, an introduction. Ruth is the 8th book in our Bibles. It is just before the books that describe the reigns of Israel's kings. It was an important book in ancient Israel because it adds some encouraging information to the story about King David. Perhaps the book of Ruth is more interesting to someone who already knows the history of David's kingdom, but it also serves as an introduction to David. It is a story about David's great-grandmother named Ruth. The unusual thing about her is that she is a Moabite, which means that she is not a Jew. And as an immigrant, she faced many difficulties. In fact, according to the law of Moses, she was not even supposed to be a part of God's people. If you look at Deuteronomy 23 verse 3 and Nehemiah 13 verse 1. But this book makes clear that God had a special purpose for her. Other important characters in the story are Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, and a man named Boaz, David's great-grandfather. The book of Ruth is about famine, death, and a dangerous journey. But the most important point of the story is how 2 faithful women prepared the way for the birth of 2 kings who would change the world. With great detail, this story tells how God carefully brought 2 people together for his purposes. It tells how he worked in their lives so that King David and finally King Jesus would be born. This important piece of God's plan deals with the relationship between 2 women. They are Ruth and Naomi, a daughter-in-law and her mother-in-law. These 2 women both suffer the death of their husbands. Then they bravely face life without protection in a very dangerous ancient world. Their story illustrates how God's laws show his love and care for his people. God's commands to the people of Israel provided for these women's care. His instructions made a way for them to be protected within their families. But they had to depend on their relative Boaz to be faithful to God's law. That is the only way Ruth and Naomi would be able to complete God's plan. In the book of Ruth, Naomi, in chapter 1, verses 1 through 18, loses her family in Moab, but gains Ruth. In chapter 1, verse 19 through chapter 2, verse 23, she returns with Ruth to Judah and struggles to survive. In chapter 3, verses 1 through 18, Naomi has a plan and Ruth follows it. And in chapter 4, verses 1 through 22, Naomi is saved by Boaz's faithfulness and sees Ruth get married. So Ruth is only 4 chapters, but they're extremely important. Let's begin. Ruth chapter 1. Famine in Judah. Long ago, when Israel's leaders were called judges, there was a famine in the land. So a man who lived in the town of Bethlehem in Judah left his home and took his wife and his 2 sons to the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They belonged to the family of Ephrathah from Bethlehem, but they went to the foreign land of Moab to live for a while. Later, Elimelech died, leaving Naomi alone with her 2 sons. The sons married women from Moab. One was named Orpah, and the other was named Ruth. After about 10 years there, Mahlon and Chilion also died. So Naomi was left alone without her husband or her 2 sons. Naomi goes home. Naomi was still in Moab when she heard that the Lord had helped his people in Judah by giving them a good harvest. So she and her daughters-in-law prepared to leave Moab. She left the place where she had been living, and her 2 daughters-in-law went with her. They started traveling towards Judah. But before long, Naomi said to her daughters-in-law,
"Go back home to your own mothers. I pray that the Lord will be as good to you as you have been to me and to my sons who are now gone. I pray that the Lord will give each of you a new husband and another good home."
As Naomi kissed her daughters-in-law goodbye, they all cried loudly. They said to her,
"No, we will go back with you to your people."
But Naomi said,
"My daughters, go back home. Why do you want to go with me? I can't have any more sons to be your husbands. Go home, my daughters. I am too old to marry again. Even if I thought that was possible, I could not help you. Even if I got married tonight and had 2 sons, you would have to wait until they were grown men to marry them. Do you really want to be without husbands that long? No, my daughters. There is no need for you to suffer like me. I am the one the Lord has turned against."
They all started crying again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth would not let go of her. Naomi said,
"Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her own people and her gods. You should go with her."
But Ruth said,
"Don't force me to leave you and go back to my own people. Let me go with you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you sleep, I will sleep. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and that is where I will be buried. May the Lord punish me if I let anything but death separate us."
When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped arguing. The homecoming. So Naomi and Ruth traveled until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived, the people in town could not stop talking about them. The women there said,
"Is this really Naomi?"
But Naomi told the people,
"You know my name means happy, but you should call me sad, because God All-Powerful has made me suffer so much. When I left, I had everything I wanted, but now the Lord has brought me home with nothing. The Lord has decided to punish me, so why should I have a happy name like Naomi? God All-Powerful has filled my life with trouble."
So Naomi returned from Moab with her daughter-in-law Ruth, the Moabite. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now Naomi had a rich relative named Boaz. He was a fine man, from the same family as her husband Elimelech. One day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi,
"I would like to go out to the fields. Maybe someone harvesting grain there will be kind enough to let me gather what they leave behind."
Naomi said,
"Okay, my daughter, go ahead."
So Ruth went out to the fields. She followed the workers who were cutting the grain and gathered the stalks they left behind. She didn't know she was in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of Elimelech. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted his workers. "The Lord be with you." And the workers replied,
"The Lord bless you too."
Then Boaz asked the young man in charge of the workers, "Who does that young woman belong to?" The servant answered,
"She's a young woman who came back from Naomi from the country of Moab. She came early this morning and asked me if she could follow the harvest workers and gather the grain left on the ground. She's been working ever since, except for a short rest."
Boaz went over to Ruth and said, "My daughter, listen to me. Stay here in my field to gather grain for yourself. You don't need to go to any other field. Stay close behind the other women workers. Watch them and follow them to the fields where the men are cutting the grain. I have told the men not to bother you. When you are thirsty, you can drink from the water jars my men have filled." Ruth bowed down with her face to the ground and said to Boaz,
Why are you so kind to me? You know I am an immigrant, so I'm surprised you even spoke to me.
Boaz answered, "I've heard about all the help you have given to your mother-in-law since your husband died. You left your father and mother and your homeland to come to a land where you did not know anyone. I pray that the Lord will reward you for all the good things you have done. May the Lord, the God of Israel, pay you in full. You have come to find safety under his care, and he will protect you." Then Ruth said,
You are very kind to say these things, sir. Your words are a great comfort and encouragement to me. I am glad to serve you, but I realize I don't have the same rights as these other women who serve you.
At mealtime, Boaz told Ruth, "Come and eat with us. Here, have some bread, and dip it in the sauce." So Ruth sat down with the workers, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain. Ruth ate until she was full and saved the rest. When she got up and went back to work, Boaz told his servants, "Let Ruth gather even around the bundles of grain. Don't bother her. In fact, pull out some heads of grain from the bundles and drop them on the ground. Let her pick them up, and don't say anything that would make her feel bad." Naomi hears about Boaz. Ruth worked in the field until evening. Then she separated the grain from the chaff. There was about 10 kilograms of barley. Ruth carried the grain into town to show her mother-in-law how much she had gathered. She also gave her the food that was left from lunch. Naomi asked her,
Where did you gather all this grain? Where did you work today? God bless the man who was so kind to you.
Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man whose field she had worked in. She said,
The man I worked with today is named Boaz.
Naomi said,
The Lord bless Boaz. He has been loyal and kind to our family, whether living or dead.
Then she explained,
Boaz is a close relative, one of our protectors.
Then Ruth said,
Boaz also told me to come back and continue working. He said I should stay close to his servants until the harvest is finished.
Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Ruth,
My daughter, it is good for you to continue working with his women servants. In another field, someone might harm you.
So Ruth continued working closely with the women servants of Boaz. She gathered grain until the barley harvest and the wheat harvest were finished, and she continued to live with her mother-in-law. John chapter 9, verses 1 to 34. While Jesus was walking, he saw a man who had been blind since the time he was born. Jesus' followers asked him, "Teacher, why was this man born blind? Whose sin made it happen? Was it his own sin or that of his parents?" Jesus answered, "It was not any sin of this man or his parents that caused him to be blind. He was born blind so that he could be used to show what great things God can do. While it is daytime, we must continue doing the work of the one who sent me. The night is coming, and no one can work at night. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." After Jesus said this, he spat on the dirt, made some mud, and put it on the man's eyes. Jesus told him, "Go and wash in Siloam pool." Siloam means sent. So the man went to the pool, washed, and came back. He was now able to see. His neighbors and some others who had seen him begging said,
"Look, is this the same man who always sits and begs?"
Some people said, "Yes, he is the one." But others said,
No, he can't be the same man. He only looks like him.
So the man himself said, "I am that same man." They asked,
"Well, what happened? How did you get your sight?"
He answered, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. Then he told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went there and washed, and then I could see." They asked him,
"Where is this man?"
He answered, "I don't know." Then the people brought the man to the Pharisees. The day Jesus had made mud and healed the man's eyes was a Sabbath day. So the Pharisees asked the man.
"How did you get your sight?"
He answered, "He put mud on my eyes. I washed, and now I can see." Some of the Pharisees said,
"That man does not obey the law about the Sabbath day, so he is not from God."
Others said,
Someone who is a sinner cannot do these miraculous signs.
so they could not agree with each other. They asked the man again.
"Since it was your eyes he healed, what do you say about him?"
He answered, "He is a prophet." The Jewish leaders still did not believe that this really happened to the man, that he was blind and was now healed. But later they sent for his parents. They asked them,
"Is this your son? You say he was born blind. So how can he see?"
His parents answered,
"We know that this man is our son, and we know that he was born blind, but we don't know why he can see now. We don't know who healed his eyes. Ask him. He is old enough to answer for himself."
They said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. The leaders had already decided that they would punish anyone who said Jesus was the Messiah. It would stop them from coming to the synagogue. That is why his parents said,
"He is old enough. Ask him."
So the Jewish leaders called the man who had been blind. They told him to come in again. They said,
"You should honor God and tell us the truth. We know that this man is a sinner."
The man answered, "I don't know if he is a sinner, but I do know this. I was blind, and now I can see." They asked,
"What did he do to you? How did he heal your eyes?"
He answered, "I have already told you that, but you would not listen to me. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to be his followers too?" At this, they shouted insults at him and said,
"You are his follower, not us. We are followers of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from."
The man answered, "This is really strange. You don't know where he comes from, but he healed my eyes. We all know that God does not listen to sinners, but he will listen to anyone who worships and obeys him. This is the first time we have ever heard of anyone healing the eyes of someone born blind. So he must be from God. If he were not from God, he could not do anything like this." The Jewish leaders answered,
"You are born full of sin. Are you trying to teach us?"
and they told the man to get out of the synagogue and to stay out. Proverbs chapter 12, verses 8 through 17.
You praise people for their intelligence, but no one respects those who are stupid. It is better to appear unimportant and have a servant than to pretend to be important and have no food. Good people take care of their animals, but the wicked know only how to be cruel. Farmers who work their land have plenty of food, but those who waste their time on worthless projects are foolish. The wicked want a share of what an evil man might catch, but like a plant with deep roots, a good man is the one who produces the most. The wicked are trapped by their evil words, but good people escape from such trouble. People get good things for the words they say, and they are rewarded for the work they do. Fools always think their own way is best, but wise people listen to what others tell them. Fools quickly become angry, but wise people ignore insults. Good people speak the truth and can be trusted in court, but liars make bad witnesses.
Thank you, everyone. That was day 136. Join us for day 137. We will complete the book of Ruth. Things heat up between Ruth and Boaz. Will they get married? You'll have to join us to find out. And in the book of John, Jesus speaks about spiritual blindness and then gives a parable about a shepherd and his sheep, a parable not heard in the other Gospels. We hope you enjoyed today's verses. Be sure to leave us a positive review and to share this podcast with your friends and family. Please join us for the next episode as we experience the Bible in 1 year.
Did you know we offer online courses in creative writing, literature, and web design? Visit us at storymaster.online to learn more.